Welcome back to another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm Susie Selleck, and today we are in Sardinia, Ohio, and we're going to be talking to a couple of folks who really know their history about this great town. So stay tuned. I'll tell you all about it. And with me now is Mary Alice Ellis. Mary Alice, thank you for having us today.
I'm glad to be here.
So let's just get into it. You are going to get to talk about some of the early history here in Sardinia. Mm-hmm. Okay.
In the early 1800s, Amos Pedigan and 5 families settled north of Sardinia, next to White Oak Creek, the East Fork of White Oak Creek. There's 2. Okay. And the 2 oldest houses are on North Main Street. One is number 125, that is Dr. Beck's brick home. And 126 is Josiah Moore's frame home. And one was started first, one was finished first.
Okay.
So we have 2 oldest houses. Dr. Beck, I started on him. He was chosen to name the town. I guess by then they were not happy with Lily or Lily Post Office, so he was chosen to name the town. He named it Sardinia after his favorite Methodist hymn, after the tune, not the words.
Okay.
And I have accomplished pianist told me it is almost impossible to play, and it's worse to try to sing. Historical Society, for a little more recent history, restored the wrought iron fence along the front of the cemetery. It had gotten in bad shape, and with the help of the community, why, it's all done and it's real nice. And another thing, in 1976, they had a contest in the 8th grade to design a flag.
Yeah.
And this is the flag that was chosen. It has the lake in the middle of a blue circle that I thought first represented the O for Ohio, but I haven't been able to verify that. The young man was Cameron McCall, who designed it.
Now joining me is Sandy Purdy. Sandy, thanks for coming in and being able to talk some history with us.
Yes,
so I understand we are going to start talking with about Reverend Mayhem.
Yes.
Go ahead and elaborate on that.
Okay. Reverend John Bennington Mahan was a Methodist minister.
Okay.
However, he threw in with the Presbyterians early on when he came to Sardinia because they were more fervent abolitionists. So he worked with them, an abolitionist. He also, through the Reverend Robert Robbins, who was a Presbyterian minister, became an ardent temperance person. So he had temperance and abolitionist going there in the 1830s. In 1837, he built a tavern, which is on the corner of Broadway and North Main Street.
Okay.
Still standing.
Wow.
The first floor was the business.
Yep.
The second floor, living quarters for the family. And the attic ended up being hidden places for runaway slaves.
Wow.
But it was called the Temperance Tavern because no alcohol was served.
Really?
Yes. So the Temperance Tavern there. He was, like I said, an ardent abolitionist, and he traveled and lectured and preached in the Midwest area.
Right.
And because of his aggressive stance, he was arrested and jailed in Maysville, Kentucky, a very damp basement in 1838. Spent 10 weeks there, and it pretty much ruined his health. But it didn't stop him from still preaching and lecturing and traveling, but he did die of tuberculosis in 1844. And his tombstone in our old cemetery says, "A victim to the slave power."
Wow. That's pretty powerful. Sandy, tell me about Dr. Beck.
Okay. Dr. Beck was a colleague of Reverend Mayhan's. He, in both the Temperance Movement and the abolitionist movement, so they were very much close cohorts. He was a medical doctor who started his practice here in 1829. He formed an anti-slavery society meeting, whatever, in 1838 to help secure the release of Reverend Mahan from prison. So he was very much involved with that. In 1863, he wrote out an exemption from military service for one named Ellis and Purdy, who happens to be a relative of my husband's, yes. And I found that paper exempting him from military service in the Civil War in the family Bible. So I have it over there, and that's really very cool to see.
Yeah, it is.
See his handwritten words there.
Oh, my.
Jumping past the Civil War, Dr. Beck answered the door in 1892. He lived a long time. He was born in 1807 and died shortly after the 1900s. So he was a long time, and all of that was here in Sardinia.
Wow.
He answered the door in 1892, and a man said that he was collecting donations for his college. He was an African-American man, and he couldn't go through Sardinia without stopping to thank the man who had brought him food while he waited in a field outside of town 50 years before.
Oh, stop.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
And he asked him his name, and he said his name was Rankin, after the man who first sent him on his way to freedom. That would be Reverend John Rankin in Ripley.
Wow. Great story, Sandy. Well, who have we missed? Is there anybody else that we should touch on here?
The hotel,
Okay.
which is no longer standing, but it was called the Marshall House. The Rebecca and William Marshall, who bought it in about 1850, they were farmers in Georgetown.
Okay.
And they were neighbors to a family named Grant. So they knew General Ulysses Grant.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I see where this is going.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they moved to Sardinia and opened the Marshall House. And Harriet Beecher Stowe stayed there for about a week while researching the Underground Railroad. Wow. We assume for her book, Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Yeah.
In that case, it'd been about 1850 when the Marshalls first moved. In 1863, July of 1863, John Hunt Morgan, and his raiders came through.
We know this name well.
Yes, came through. They burnt the covered bridge here west of town, and then they pretty much took everything there was in the livery and the stores around. And then General Hobson of the Union Army was fast on his trail. And when he came, there wasn't much left. So the Marshall's daughter, Jane, made them donuts until the flour and lard run out. So then she married Nathan Dunn, who was the livery owner next door, and it became the Dunn House then. So, and there... He was a Civil War veteran. Right. I had a foot partially amputated by a cannonball on the siege of Atlanta with Sherman earlier. They got married in 1867 and took over the business, so it became the Dunn House. And their claim to fame is sort of in our church history, which is the Methodist Church. They were devout Methodists, and they could walk across the street, South Main Street, to services. And one morning, they decided, as was the custom, men and women didn't sit together. They split and sat one on each side, and they didn't. They went in and sat together. And after that, it was no longer segregated.
Wow.
The church. So it was kind of fun. That's in church history, but I thought that was a little story with Nathan and Jane Dunn.
That's a good one.
So
I like that.
Then it became the commercial hotel in 1898 until it was torn down in 2013.
Joining us now is Patsy Alvers. Patsy, thank you for coming in with us today.
Thank you for being here.
Now, I understand that you're going to be talking about an opera house, and I just want you to get into it.
All righty. The Opera House was built on the corner of North Main and Broadway. It's a big two-story building, and the top floor, the second floor, was the Opera House. And in there, they had traveling shows, and they had their town meetings, and they had stage plays and things like that, and then they even had basketball games. And then on the main floor of the building was businesses.
Okay.
On the North Main side, there was 3 businesses. One of them was a hardware store that was owned by Mr. Feike. There was also the first bank in town, which was the Fike Marshall Bank. And it had our very first vault in it, which it was sort of hidden underneath the stair steps that went up to the Opera House.
Oh, cool.
And then also one of our first funeral directors was in there, E.P. Calvin. So since that time, it has had many different hardware stores, restaurants, different things like that.
Right.
Then in the front on Broad Street it only had 2 storefronts to it. And it started out as a general merchandise store and also a meat market.
Okay. All right.
And as time progressed, things went on. Several people were in there. There were the Jacob brothers, and it was turned into a clothing store. And in that clothing store was men's on the left side and women's clothes on the right side. And in the back of the store was shoe racks, and there was shelves and shelves of shoes. And there was so many that they had to have this ladder that had casters on it, and it ran on a rail up at the top.
Yeah.
And they would climb the ladder and slide down and get whatever size shoe that they was looking for. Since then, it has closed down from a clothing store, and it has been a video store, it's been an exercise shop, it's been an antique mall, and it's also been a secondhand store. And it's one of our businesses that is still, the building is still standing, and it's right in the center of town.
Joining me now is Jim Ellis. Jim, thank you for joining. Actually, thank you for having us today. So let's just get into your part of the history here. We can start off with Mr. Kennedy.
Speaking of George Kennedy, he was an entrepreneur. He really was a civic man. He really tried to boost the village. And he had many thoughts about that. He had a traveling fair, like a county fair, mostly centered here in Sardinia for a period of about 11 years, 1900 to 1911, I believe it was. And he had set a lot of firsts, like a first airplane ever in Brown County was here. He brought in a balloon for balloon rides, but they would not let people ride, so he had a monkey called Bob Doolittle that rode in the tethered balloon. He had a very large racetrack with a very large grandstand. We have some pictures that show that. And he was big enough that there was train excursions out of Cincinnati, 50 miles away, just to come to the fair. And then also, they went from Portsmouth, which is east of us, and from Columbus, which is north. They brought it on the train. He had a flour mill, 3-story flour mill that served Brown County, well, southern Ohio counties. Was very well done. He owned a lot of land across from the fairgrounds. He donated land for the railroad, a large railroad yards, and a place for the depot. And across from that, he started a sawmill. I just come back to me, some of the first he had at the fairgrounds was electric lighting, and he extended that down to the streets of Sardinia. Really had a crossroads of railroads. The Cincinnati and Eastern came here first in 1877, and in Sardinia, and it was built on to Portsmouth and eventually on to Norfolk, and become a Norfolk and Western Railway later years. During the early 1900s, there was a train from here to the Ohio River, going through Georgetown, Ohio, down to Ripley. And then there was also from here going to Hillsboro, which is north, went through Morristown to Hillsboro, and it was laid out to go on to Columbus. So we had a crossroads of railroad, both for passenger and for freight. And this was a great boost to the economy of Sardinia for probably 100 years.
Really?
Of course, railroads have faded out now a lot of places.
Right.
And there's still one comes through occasionally, just a little bit of freight is about all we got. But it really was the basis of our economy some years ago.
So, Jim, can you tell us a little bit about this Houston Bear person? Who is this?
Well, he was a landowner. He owned much land around Sardinia on the west side and on the north side. He come into town, young man. He joined a partner. He's a merchant for a few years, 5 years maybe, and then he moved out west to the town. He joined the town with his farm. He'd started buying while he was a merchant, and up to the time of his death, there's about 400 acres in that. But during that time, he extended the town lots west. Some were on the north side of the railroad, and some on the south side of the railroad, which turns out to be Maple Avenue now. It goes toward Mount Orb. But from there, he just farmed, and at the time of his death, there was some 400 acres in the farm. It's still a farm today. Some of his ancestors are still farming today.
Really? Thank you for watching another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. Today we were in Sardinia having a great time with these folks. And remember, travel slowly and stop often. Bye for now.